Seize Backstage. This is your all-access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your next event. I'm Troy Peters, Chief Experience Officer here at Seize Productions, to guide you through the world of live event production. Remember to subscribe to the podcast at seizpro.com/backstage or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Today, I'm very excited about today's talk because this is a world that I believe in, a world that I, profess and teach about a little bit. We have Nancy Spooner, founder and CEO of Tempo Live Events. And tell us a little bit about what Tempo Live Events does and how you provide us with some of the best show callers, stage managers, all those things in the business. Give us your spiel.
All right. I like to say we provide the best freelancers on the planet to event agencies and event planners looking for freelancers.
Right.
Our sweet spot is very client-facing producers of all types, from executive producers, breakout producers, content producers, and stage managers / show callers. We'll go through the different titles and roles and responsibilities. Deck managers, graphics ops. So I've been freelancing my whole life, and in 2008, I'd morphed into, I came from television and film, like you, and broadcast and sports, and then I morphed into corporate in just after the Olympics in Salt Lake 2002. And about 2008, I realized I was getting a lot of people work, and if I started a business, I might have a side hustle, and it was my side hustle because I was getting, people were asking me for, do you have another show caller, or do you have any graphics ops? Do you know where I can find a producer? And I was like, sure. And so I started a little Google spreadsheet and had a list of my friends on it, and I would get them work that they didn't have before, so they loved it, and then my clients loved it because it was one phone call to me, and I would line people up on a show. And fast forward, 2020, pandemic hit, our world shut down, and I called for a happy hour in this new thing called Zoom. And I had a bunch of Tempo teammates on this happy hour, and we were just talking about, like, I would bring a topic every Tuesday, and it would be like, who's your favorite person you ever had on stage, or lessons learned backstage. They were very, very lighthearted because, we're just out of work for a little bit, and we just wanted to see each other because we just lost all of our shows for that second quarter. And cliff notes to that Zoom happy hour started to get more serious, and it ended up turning into an industry think tank where every Tuesday we got together and we taught each other how to call shows from home and how to survive in this new virtual world, and how are we handling all these audio devices. All these audio devices, we have 2 ears, but now you have your multi-view, and you have your Zoom, and you have your whatever feeds. Like, I forget all these feeds now because I haven't done virtual in a long time. But so Tempo's database just started exploding during the pandemic because I was a place where people were coming and learning how to call shows and how to direct shows and how to handle this virtual world. And the contractors kept telling their contractors, and they kept telling their clients that there's a place to go to find freelancers. And that's where we are today. Now it's a full-time job. I side hustle as a freelancer.
It's now full-time.
Yeah. I'll call shows, and I will deck manage shows. I don't really produce anymore. This is my full-time job, just sending freelancers out to events, and now it's just a blast. I absolutely love it. I've just naturally connected people, and now it's working.
Right. And those are the positions. Those are what I typically call top line positions, where it's like you want to travel out your graphics op. You want to travel out your stage manager, your show caller, again, all the different terms. But really, those are the people that are going to be, for me, on the account management, on the sales side, and managing an account team, that we really just want the success of the clients, like we all do. But really, it's like, I can't be there because I'm working on selling the next show. So who is the team that needs to be there? Those are the people that are going to make that show shine, right? So it's, as much as the client might want to be, some clients don't want to be on stage or backstage, but they want to know there's somebody back there, whether it's somebody managing their graphics presentation or somebody that's actually miking up the president of the United States and then taking them on stage. They want to know that that's being taken care of in the best way possible, because that makes them look good.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those positions that I feel like Tempo fills the most are very client facing. They're the deck manager, backstage manager, ASM, we'll go through all the terms, that's physically saying, Mr. President, here's your downstage monitor, here's your speaker timer, and here, they're touching the client, and the client's guest, right? Yeah. And then your stage manager, the show caller, is calling all the cues to make sure that everything is seamless and they're hitting the stage at the right time and the video is playing at the right time and the graphics op. People don't always think about that, but you have a stressed out client backstage looking at his deck with the graphics op who's, I need to change this, I need it. And the graphics op needs to be calm and cool. Doors have opened and you have a client sitting next to you making panic changes on his deck. Like, you need to have somebody who knows how to handle PowerPoint very quickly and seamlessly. Yeah.
So I teach a class. I don't know if I've told you this, but a session at Infocom every year, and I recently found out it's their number one attended and sells out every year, highest ranked class.
Nice.
And it's a 2-hour session on how to manage that room and how to be a show caller. I've done it a few times. I've seen really good show callers and taken notes and been like, what do you aspire to? And it's exactly what you said. It's like calm and collected. Because typically I'll have project managers and show callers, industry people in that room. And so it's, for me, it's very nerve-wracking talk to give, because these are our peers, right? They're at the same level as me, or some of them even better, but just want to learn a few tips. And so I always use examples of mission control. So I show when Apollo 13 was like going south, somebody recorded the control room. They had film of that and audio, and you just hear the control team saying, okay, I know everybody's got an idea how to fix the problem, but we've got the perfect engineer working the problem now. Everybody else keep working on what your job is, right? And so just those little things of being able to like calm the room when things are starting to go south and bring everybody back on the same page and have a successful mission is absolutely amazing.
I love that. I when I see SpaceX stuff, I am glued to the control room, and I've gotten teary-eyed. I'm not gonna lie. Like they're so young too, by the way. Mission control for SpaceX, they're so young. But I watch them thinking of what we do, which is not rocket science, but it's very similar. Yeah. Like, we are making something happen on time, and all the players that they have to talk to make sure is, roll video and night engines, whatever it is. Like, I
stand by this.
I think
go,
mission
no,
control,
go, right? Is this working? Okay, we're go. Is this working? Okay, we're go. No, this isn't working. Okay, step around. That's so funny, because my original version of that talk, I've been giving it for about 6 or 7 years, was called Stage Management, Show Calling and Stage Management. It's just rocket science.
Oh my gosh,
like it's just rocket science. As long as you stay on task, on time, and communicate.
Oh my gosh.
That's what they're doing to launch a rocket. So
it is.
Yeah,
that's just a great analogy. I love that.
So let's talk through the positions. Let's kind of start from the top and work our way down. Executive producer. And again, we know that different parts of the country, different companies use different terms for the same role. What's your view? What's Nancy's view of what a producer does? What does that producer do with the client?
They make the client's vision come to life.
Perfectly said. I agree. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting when you say that is when I meet a new client, one of the first things I do is I send over our roles and responsibilities sheet that explains to us in our terms what we call the people working those positions, because of the way a TD, there's so many different types of TDs in our industry, right?
Yep.
It's stuff like that. So, and when I interview contractors and they tell me, well, I produce this, I'm like, what do you mean? What does that mean? What is it? What do you do as a producer? So I think the executive producer, I also see dollar signs in that they manage more of the budget. Executive producers often have something to do with the dollars and the budget. And then, and the top line, big picture with the client. And then
that
depending
30,000 view, these are the deliverables. This is where we need to get to.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
Correct.
Get it done.
Yep. And if there's I think of like a pharmaceutical national sales meeting. I mean, there's the executive producer and there's the big keynote room, but then there's also all the franchise meetings, or there's a lot of companies that break down into the different sections of their company. And I see those as event producers or room producers where they're handling that one portion of it. And then I see there's also breakout producers who now have the breakout rooms that are even a little bit smaller. And a breakout producer will often call the show cues as well. It's a much smaller room, not as intense, and it's probably just a couple AV team members in there. But then the content producer, that some people don't realize the value of a content producer, and that's the person that is taking all of the content and making sure that it is organized and it is labeled properly and that it's quality controlled. And we are sending out a ton of content producers lately, which is really cool to watch them and see how people are finding the value of. There's a content producer even for signage. There's so much content coming at, and a producer, if I'm an executive producer or a room producer, I don't have time to look at all the content and all the video rolls and all the graphics and make sure they're labeled properly. And, there's probably other things I'm doing, making sure that the AV crew's got, I'm working with my TD to make sure the room's being set up. So a content producer, I think, is a huge. Another
Totally.
producer role.
Yeah, and having somebody that even is just on top of version control. Like there's a lot of times where we'll be doing financials and a CFO might be pulling financials that morning, walking backstage and going, I need to update these 4 or 5 slides. Do you have version 6 or, final, right? The
Yes,
one that says
nothing's
final. It's like, well, you mean final. So is it version 6? And if it's not, then okay, we need to make sure you've got that last version. And so having somebody that's accountable to that alone
Yeah.
is such a key
Content
piece.
producer.
Yeah.
Yep. Then there's your video producer. We could go. There's
Yeah,
so many
let's
producers.
go all the way there. And then and then even we just did a show and we had a defense track at the show and we were still getting slides in 4:3 that I would have loved to have seen beforehand, because nothing's in 4:3 anymore that we're putting up on screen. So we had to last minute fix it, make it work. But yeah, having somebody that really is looking at those things, because you as a client want the experience to be perfect, and whenever you skip one of those things, it just erodes at that perfection just a little bit, right?
Yep.
All right, so producers. Next role is really the stage manager or show caller, or technical director, stage manager, or show caller. Those 3. Talk through how Tempo sees as those positions are.
Okay. Technical director, I see working hand in hand with the producer. They're building the show. They know the technical requirements. They help decide how many people can fit in the room, the CAD drawings for the room. Are we LED? Are we a wall? Are we doing rear projection, front projection? Like, what's the plan? What's the budget? They work to technically put that vision to life.
Yep.
So I, as a producer, we did a lot of shows with Tempo where we would send out a producer, and we still do this, a producer, a TD, and like a graphics op and a show caller. Like those are the 4. If you have a room that you just want to hand off, I can take 4 people and make that room go, and then the TD will bring in the AV team to build that. But the TD, I think, is, to me, that's a really good role, a way to describe a TD to me. They take the vision and technically make it happen. Because as a producer, I don't understand all the technology. I don't know what we need backstage.
Totally.
Yeah.
I find myself often in that producer / account management role because I know how to go in and paint a picture, right? We started in broadcast. So it's like, okay, this is the concept. This is what it's going to look like. This is how amazing it's going to be. And I know how to sell it, where a client's like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And then I turn around to my TD and go like, all right, figure this out.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so yeah, that TD role has been in my life has been so instrumental. And I understand most of the pieces, but yeah, having somebody that's just dedicated to knowing, to working with the in-house rigging team, to working with, okay, well, screen formats, we're doing a widescreen. What's the content need to be delivered to that? So often we'll have an EIC or an engineer in charge that then kind of works with that person to make sure that all the system routing works, right? So the TD is kind of more physical and EIC is kind of more the digital side, right? Getting everything speaking to each other. So awesome. Okay, so TD, we've covered producer, TD, and then now let's start talking about show caller.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like to call it show caller. However, I just had a think tank, a Tempo think tank, and it was focused on the stage manager / show caller. And I brought in a gentleman named Matt Stern, and he owns the Broadway Stage Manager Symposium in New York City. He does Broadway, but he also does corporate now, and he's training Broadway stage managers how to call corporate shows. And I said, I don't want to offend a trained stage manager, because I am not a trained stage manager. I am scrappy. Like, I was thrown in a tower at the X Games in my 20s and told to call the show, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I got into corporate and started listening. My very first corporate show was a pharmaceutical, and I said, roll video in 3, 2, 1.
Right.
Roll video. And somebody got on comm and said, we're not going to move until you say G-O.
Yeah.
He goes, but you count backwards beautifully. I know you come from broadcast.
Yeah.
I love that.
3, 2. Yeah.
So the stage manager, I've lost my train of thought a little bit on this now.
So stage manager and show caller.
So yeah, I was asking.
The show caller term really is something I think in corporate we prefer, but it's the same thing, kind of.
It is. So I asked Matt, I said, what's the difference between a show caller and a stage manager? Is it offensive if I call you a show caller? And I guess because where the name came from, Broadway stage managers, they truly manage everything. They have so much more responsibilities of managing everything on the stage. Even though they're calling the cues, they're in charge of managing every aspect of the stage, and they have to know deck management stuff. I almost obviously forget exactly what he told me, but it was overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so that's why they don't often like to be called show callers. I
Right.
think in the corporate world, we don't really manage the stage. We work very closely with a backstage manager or a deck manager. And I was told years ago from a stage manager, show caller that I really admire. He's like, I don't want to call them ASMs because I was his ASM. He's like, you're not my ASM. You're not my assistant stage
Right.
manager. He's like, you're the deck manager. That is your deck. You own it. I don't own it, Nancy. And I thought that was really cool. So
I
I try
like
not
that.
to call them ASMs anymore. So
Yeah.
I call them backstage managers or deck managers. So your show caller is calling cues, also called a stage manager.
Mhm.
And I make it very clear when I'm working with a client. When you say stage manager, what do you mean?
Right.
For example, I got a call last week. I need a stage manager in Vegas tonight. The show text tomorrow. Oh my God, can you help me? You got it. I went online. I posted it to our group, got a bunch of stage managers, and then I called her back and talked to her. I was like, okay, tell me more about your show, and I'll handpick the right person for you. She goes, oh, no, I don't want someone to call cues. I need someone to make sure they're mic'd and just, push the people on stage, like
Right.
that kind of stage manager. And I was like, oh, in my world, that's a deck manager. I got
Right.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of my stage managers is brilliant at both, so he ended up doing the gig. But the stage manager, front of house, show caller, calling the cues, writing the show flow or taking the show flow from the producer and making it their own and making sure everybody on their team knows exactly where they are at what second and what should be happening on the stage.
So they're at front of
That's our
house. They've
show
got
caller.
a multi-view. They're looking at every asset they can possibly put up on screens and who's going to be up next on microphones,
Yep.
what audio cues need to play. We got a stinger to bring somebody on, all that sort of thing.
And
And I love the story about the ASM because you're right. In the last 10 years, the term assistant stage manager has kind of started to drop off. I would say really for me, because it was a term I'd been using probably a little bit too long. The last 2 years, deck manager. And I love that because that is
Isn't that neat?
truly what you're doing. You're managing that deck, whether it's, all right, we need to get 5 chairs on because we're going into a panel, right, while this video is playing. Or do you have so-and-so backstage? I've got them. They're ready here. And, I was a deck manager, now that I use that term, on one of my first shows. That was kind of the first role I was thrown into because I understood timing and flow and things like that. And it was like, I'd be hand on my back and then like tap, tap off onto the stage you go. Right. So, wish I was called the deck manager back then. I didn't want to be an assistant. Come on.
no, you're running that
You're
deck.
you're running it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a show we just completed, a very large show we just completed, we had levels of deck management where we had a deck manager, and I think her term was ASM, but it was associate producer. So it was an associate producer working with the producer to make sure producer was working in the room and the associate producer was working on everything backstage. So they were basically connected and then communicating things to our deck manager and communicating things to the front of house to our show caller.
Yep.
Which-
And I've seen them called talent producers back there as well that run the show I was just on. It's like a 20,000 square foot deck. It's a huge deck. So there's backstage right, backstage left was the other deck manager. And then we had talent producer who was running between all the green rooms, making sure the talent
Right.
was getting sent to makeup and to our A2 to get them mic'd up to get
Yep.
them. And it depends on the size of the show, what you need backstage. But
Mhm.
yeah, so stage manager calling cues works directly with the deck manager. And that deck manager is a huge part of rehearsal, unless the producer is very hands-on with the client. But I have been on that deck many times where I am running that rehearsal in cahoots with my show callers, and who I'm the one with the client saying, showing them where their DSMs are and where their speaker timer is, and they're looking at prompter and they need to make changes to prompter. I'm the one relaying to prompter what needs to be changed or graphics that needs to be changed, and then talking with the client when they're ready to present. Then I'm telling the whole team, all right, take it over. I send it back to the stage manager who's now going to call the cues and get everything lined up. But I
Right.
feel like I'm the one on the deck that's talking to that client, that presenter, making sure that rehearsal is going. And we're going to go here now, and we're going to move here. Are you ready to move on? Like, it's, someone's got to be with that client running rehearsal. So I think the stage and deck manager are very tied together, especially during rehearsal. And people don't think about that often.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes the producer's up there with the client, but sometimes they're out they have to do something else. So you got to have a deck manager that will manage the flow backstage, on stage, in rehearsal, not just live show.
Yeah. Are you coming on left, exiting right, coming on right, exiting? Are we doing a grip and grin? Are we handshakes? Like all of that coordination if you don't know, you think it just happens naturally. But as soon as it hasn't been coordinated, it gets clunky so fast and feels very awkward, right? You got somebody walking off left, but they're supposed to receive the award on the right.
Oh my
And
God, award shows.
Yeah.
Yes. I heard one of your podcasts talking about getting a deck manager on an award show, and it changed their life.
Oh
And
yeah.
I was like, oh my God, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, award
This-
shows especially because
Yeah.
there's so much going on back there. Where are they getting their trophy? Where are they taking their photo? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we kind of covered all the sort of positions, right?
Yep.
Kind of thing. Talk to me a little bit about personalities. How do you manage personalities? I mean, you've got a great database of all of these talented individuals. How does Nancy go, okay, this client is looking for this kind of person? Because I think that is a really big piece of the success, right?
Mhm.
Is that the right person to put in front of that client? Or maybe they've got a producer and you got to make sure the right person can work with that kind of style of producer.
Exactly. That's huge. Well, I've been doing it for 30 years, like freelancing myself for 30 years. So I know, first of all, that most freelancers are awesome, right? Because they're only as good as their last gig. If you're not that good with a personality with clients of all different types, you don't last long in our industry and you'll fade away. So they get the benefit of the doubt, first of all, but no one will ever go on show site unless I know them or that I know somebody that knows them and recommended them, or I've done this with them. And I do that with every single freelancer. If I don't personally know you, you're getting on a Zoom with me and we're going to talk about it. And I'll drive them through scenarios of, so you're running graphics and your backstage doors are open. Here's a thumb drive. What are you going to do? I like to hear them tell me what they're going to do. Or stage managers, I also will give like little trick questions to them that I want to hear how they respond to that, so I get to know them. But when it's a big personality that I know they're going to be working with, I also always let the client interview the contractors, especially in a producer position. That's huge. They got to fit the jam and the vibe with the client. So I often will line up a handful of producers and hand them to my client and go, why don't you interview and talk to them and see? And I've been surprised sometimes on the person that they chose when I was really thinking they're going with this one. And they're like, no, we just didn't jive. And I'm like, well, interesting. Yeah.
And that's great. You really connecting them beforehand, giving them like, here, let's talk to this person and see. Yeah. Make sure they're the right fit.
Some roles, it's a no-brainer. It's easy. And clients will say, Nancy, you just pick them. You know, they know I'll
this
choose
person's
fine.
done a sports-centered thing or awards program. So that's the person that knows how to fit and run that role, right? So,
Yeah. And then sometimes I want them to meet them, especially producers, when they're going to be interacting a lot with the agency. If it's like, 200 hours of pre-pro or whatever, you got to have the right fit.
Yeah.
Someone to call some cues. I can get you a really good show caller who I know is good with everybody and a great personality.
I love that. So one of my favorite things, I told you a little bit that I teach as best I can a session on show calling, stage management, that sort of thing. And we look at some of the big things that have happened in live events. We talk a little bit about the Academy Awards when they read the wrong name.
Ouch.
How do you manage that, right? That's sort of the conversation. And I just opened it up to the whole room and we just talked through like, what would you have done? What would you do in that such situation? I think there was a Super Bowl in the Mercedes Dome in New Orleans, 2013 or something, where the power went out, right? Lost power halfway through. That's broadcast a little easier because you can cut to studio, and that's what they did, right?
Yeah.
So they were in studio for like 20 minutes while they tried to figure out how to get the power back on. So the one I'm going to hit you with and get your input on is, remember Mariah Carey, New Year's Eve, microphone failed, or her monitors. I think it was her monitors that didn't work, or in-ear monitors had fallen out or something like that. What do you do? Hot seat.
Oh,
what do you do as the stage manager?
Try not to
New
cry.
Year's Eve. Try not to cry.
Try not to cry. Yeah. Remain calm. I think you need to be the pilot. If you start panicking, think about turbulence. If you're flying a plane and there's some turbulence and you start getting a panic in the back, if you hear your pilot come on and start panicking, you're going to freak out. But the pilot's like, all right, we're going to go through some turbulence. Everybody fasten your seatbelts a little tighter. Hang on. I got this. I think you need to, as a stage manager, show caller, you better take the reins and act like the pilot and remain calm so that the rest of your team remains calm.
Yeah.
And then start going down the checklist. Like, what can we do? It seems like an audio problem. All right, so let's get my audio engineer or my A2, who's ever closest to her, and someone start troubleshooting and keep the comms quiet for those that need to be involved. Because I've seen it where, graphics has an idea or, video has an idea, but And I like the team player mentality of that. Like
And that's a natural thing for all of us that are in these high pressure situations. We always want to offer help, right?
yeah.
But you're right.
If
Getting
there's
people to like pause, let's let
yeah,
the professional that's working on it figure it out.
yeah, find your co-pilot. As the stage manager, you could be the pilot, and then find your co-pilot who's going to handle that situation best. Right now, it seems like an audio issue, right? It's not video. It's not downstage monitor going out or the LED wall. Let's let audio tackle it. And if someone has a suggestion at some point, then that's fine. But yeah, let the co-pilot handle it.
That's a great analogy. I'm the same way. I fly a lot. Obviously, we do in this business. And I'm always like, when it's bad turbulence, I just look at how the flight attendants are. Are they still calm?
Are they running around
I'm
screaming?
good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. That's awesome. So really appreciate you coming on the show, giving us some insight and some help for hopefully our clients, but even our technicians and our show callers, stage managers out there to help understand what it is that we're all trying to do, which is just have a successful event.
Yep, I agree. Thanks for having me. This is neat. I love your show.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Again, Nancy, how can people find you? If somebody's looking for a producer show caller, what should they do?
TempoLiveEvents.com.
That's easy.
It's easy.
TempoLiveEvents.com.
Yep.
Right on.
Request for contractor.
I love
Click
it.
away.
Perfect. Well, again, this has been C's Backstage. This is your all access pass to everything you need to know to design, produce, and inspire your events. Make sure you follow our podcast at cspro.com/backstage or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.